So after I got everything all set up here, I had my wonderful setup tool that told me what size shims and spacers to use, and got my bearings all set up. Looked all over the internet and nobody tells you what order to do this in. So I'm winging it here. Maybe it seems obvious to you, it doesn't to me, but you've got to pack the wheel bearings first. And you've got to pack inside that hub as well. And I have a handy dandy installer tool that I probably should have got out before I got my hands all messy. But you want to try to push this wheel bearing grease into those bearings best you can. And then I would assume, you know what that does though, that you put this outer bearing in its place first, and then the larger of the two what are they called, the seals goes on the outside. I know the smaller one goes on the inside, so that much I know. So I don't have a tool to install this with, and I'm assuming that once I flip this over, I will be able to drop the spacer and shim in from the other side. But we're winging it here, because nobody tells you how to do this. Maybe I should look in my shop manual. Read directions? Nah. So, when you don't have a driver to drive in seals, nice piece of 2x4 to spread the load across and get your job done. I probably should have packed the inside of that first, but like I said, no instructions. I'll flip it over and do it from the other side. Yeah, a little bit harder to reach it from this side, but you can get in there. Again, they tell you to pack this full, but it's hard to know what full is when you've still got to put the spindle shaft in there, and the spacers and shims and bearings. Trying to remember how much I took out. Probably going to have it oozing out the top here whenever I try to press it in. Okay. I think that's good. So I've got the new spindle there, and I put some wheel bearing grease on it. That's mainly to help the bearings get pressed in. A little bit of lubrication on there because it's a press fit. And but like I said, no instructions anywhere to tell you what to do, what order to do this in. This is the inner bearing that goes in last when you put the shaft in. And I don't know what kind of force this is going to take to press those in. But here we go to start. Put the carrier down on the spindle. I better see if I'm still in the on the frame here. Okay, I am. I'm putting a little bit of grease that's on my fingers onto the spacer now, and I'll put some onto the shim. Once I get this inner bearing in, it will stop flopping around as much. Now it still may want to fall over because the weight is not distributed evenly. Trying to support this, but I don't have anything the right height. That's about the right height. Let's move this over. There we go. Now I probably have to aim the camera. Okay, not so much. So now I've got all that in there. And I think I can put this cap back on. It's just a dust shield, and it actually went on easily by hand. The next thing is probably to put the flange on that holds the bolts to the half shaft. Let's see, I'm working on the driver's side. I gotta go get the one that I took off the driver's side. Sorry for that delay while I went and got it, but I really have a messy pair of gloves. I don't want to touch the camera. I think I'm going to take them off so I can shut the camera off while I untape that from where I masked it off to paint it. Okay, so this flange that holds the half shaft fits onto the splines on the hub spindle. Almost lost the camera there. Got to get that lined up so it drops in correctly. There it is. And then the installation tool threads onto the spindle shaft, and you tighten that as far as it will go. And I can see that I probably don't have a big enough impact socket down here. We'll see. Hopefully it's the same size as that other one, and I do have one of those. Oops, that's not the installation. They're the setup tool. I don't see my nut from the setup tool. Need to be more organized. At any rate, that appears to be locked down as far as it goes. Once you have that on, you have a sleeve that goes over it and a nut that goes onto that. And you simply tighten the nut, and it pulls it all together. Before I do this, I don't think I can, I better check it, but I don't think I can put the seal on yet. but I better check it. Now, it's not the end of the world if you put that on and then you have to go back and take it off to get the seal on, because this comes out rather easily. Huh. That's interesting. Oops. Wait a minute. I think I see the problem. This is not where the seal goes. The seal goes down here. And again, no instructions onto which side's up. You know what, I think I'm going to press the bearing in first and then take it off and put the seal on. And the reason I want to do it that way is because I don't know that this should be pressing on the seal while you're trying to pull that spindle on. Sure would be nice if they give you some instructions. So I am going to pull that on, and then I'm going to put the seal on, and then I'm going to put it back together. I have to see if I have a socket that fits that. So it's getting late. Time for me to quit. I will take this up to my garage with me, and the next time I come down to work, I will have a socket that fits it. That's it for today. So here we are, it's a new day. I got the socket for the installation tool. It's 1.25 inches. I'm hoping that when I install it, I'm going to have enough on there, depth of the socket, so that it doesn't push it off with that. I have lubricated the threads on here. I've lubricated the top of this, and I am going to put the washer that goes on, well, I guess I'm not, because it doesn't fit over the tool. But that washer fits over the shaft. It goes on the end before the nut. But before I do that, I've ground down the spacer that goes between here and here This is the shock mount, this is the strut rod mount. That's all set to go. So I am going to grease up that bolt so that I don't have trouble taking it off if I ever have to take it off again. So that goes in starting from this side, then I'll put at least some grease on where I ground it down. Goes in from this side, through the spacer that you have to grind down. Yesterday that slipped right in there. Today I can't find it. I see the problem. I've got to clean out the hole from grinding it down. I'll have to get out a file and reach inside there and grind it down, or file it down. Okay, I've got that all cleaned out. I should have done this before I got my hands all greasy. I need to take the end of the strut rod off so that I can put it through that mount. So I'm going to have to take these gloves off and do that. Or at least clean up my gloves. That's a better idea. They're clean enough, I think. What I should have done, which I didn't do, I didn't unlock any of my tool chests before I started this. So while I do that, I'm going to shut the camera off. So this side of the strut rod is a left-hand thread. In other words, to remove it, you turn it to the right. Just took a 7/8 inch wrench on the flat here that you use to adjust your camber, and I used a large crescent wrench on the locking nut here. So I'm going to remove the end and then I'm going to set this strut rod over on the driver's side, since that's the trailing arm I'm working on. That way I'll know when I put it on that the thread's backwards. I don't know if it was backwards on the other side here or not. That's interesting. They've already got some lube in there to keep it from seizing. Unless I did that and don't remember. So this heim joint comes in several pieces. I'm going to make sure I put grease on the insides of these things so that if I ever have to take them off again, they're going to come off without destroying them. I hope I don't have to take them off, because that would mean they didn't last a long time. I expect them to last. So once I get all the lube on all this, it can go in here and the bolt goes through it. There's a flat on this bolt that you need to make sure lines up with the flat in the spindle. And then I just saw the nut that went on it. There it is. This has a nylon locking nut. So once it goes on, it's going to stay. Put a little bit of grease on that so that it doesn't rust on. Although generally speaking, getting those large nuts off, you just hit them with the impact wrench and they're good. So the last thing is I should have done this while I had it off, but get some grease on the heim joint part so that it doesn't wear prematurely. Just a light coating. There's really more movement this way on that joint than anything else, I think, once you get it on the car and start to actually use it, because that's the suspension travel. I don't think it rotates a whole heck of a lot. So that's on, and the reason I wanted to get that on is I wanted to make sure that as we pull the spindle through, it doesn't mess up the alignment on that, make it difficult to get through. I had a little bit of trouble getting the other side through, and I think it might be because on the other side I put that in, the bolt, before I tightened the spindle to the trailing arm, and therefore the spindle was probably a little out of alignment. But I got it through and then tightened it, and it's all good. So I think the way to approach that is the way I did this one. Tighten the spindle to the trailing arm first, and then put the bolt through. So next step is to actually press this on. There's my nut. Like I said, I've lubricated the threads, put a little bit of lube on the spacer there. Now we're going to get a little use out of the socket. I don't know that we're going to be able to pull that all the way on with that socket, because I think as we pull the spindle up, the bolt is going to start to come through and drive the socket out of there. Got to get out the impact wrench now. So I'm trying to get you the best view I can of this, and what you should see as I tighten this is this flange should get closer to these brake shoes here on the parking brake. I have it set up, you can see the tool, you can see a little bit of the socket, but you're not going to see the impact wrench, which incidentally I have the impact wrench turned on its lower setting right now, because I don't want to do this too fast. You notice it is pulling it in, and that's on my lowest setting on the impact wrench. Okay, I think I'm going to have to bump it up one. Turning the flange. Check the progress down there. See if I can see the not quite sure, thanks to no directions, how you're supposed to tell when this is all the way on. Let me go look at the old one that I never took the bearing off of to see where that sits. So this is the original one where I never removed the bearing, and what I'm looking at is this space right here, because that has never been moved. When I look inside this, let's see if I can get the light on here. Oops. See if the light does me any good. Come on. There's the light. When I look down inside there, and I look right at that space right there. That's the space between the seal and the wheel hub flange. So I think we're all the way in. If we're not, I would suspect that torquing it to 100 foot-pounds for the final installation is going to pull it the rest of the way in. So now we've got to take the installation tool off. And by the way, that was much easier with that installation tool than the way I did it the last time, which was just put it together and use the nut that holds it on. That tool was worth the money. I'm sure there's a better way to keep this all together in one place. Because this will slide right off. Well, I'll go put it in the toolbox where it's going to reside for now. Right next to my setup tool. This comes right off. Grease seal needs to go in. I really wish there was a way that they told you was in and out on this. 'Cause I think I'm going to take a walk up to the garage and see if I can find a socket. I know in my 3/4 inch set, there's some pretty big sockets. I'm going to see if I can get a socket that will rest on this and help me drive that in evenly. Okay, I got a 2-inch socket which fits on this perfectly. And in looking at this, maybe I'm wrong, but it appears that I've got a slight bevel in that way. So that's the way I'm going to try to install it, even though looking at the one that I didn't take out, it appears they installed it the opposite way. But doesn't always mean that they did it right. Well, worst that can happen is I ruin a seal. They're not that expensive. Try to get this a little closer and get a view done in there. So I've lined up the spacers best I can. Line up the socket exactly on the spacer. And it's the perfect size. So hopefully this works for me. Feels like it already started to go in. It's hard to keep that centered on it. There was a different socket that fit inside that, but I was afraid to go with the one that didn't sit on the very outside of the rim. And that's in. This shield goes on top of that. You can just put that on by hand. That's easy. And then our flange for the half shafts goes on. I don't think that's all the way done. That's not all the way down, that's for sure. Well, let's do it this way again. Helps to drive it evenly if you can do that. Might be just hung up on that having difficulty going through that seal. That's interesting. That should go in further than that. I wonder if I should have installed it further with the installation tool. So now using the installation tool, I could be in danger of ruining the seal. Get it out and look again. Maybe not, because this may fit inside that. Really bad that they don't give you better instructions. I am gonna try this again. It looked like it was fine to me, but and that doesn't go over that. I remembered that just as I tried to put it on. We'll bump it up another notch on the impact wrench, and there's 4 settings. I'm on 2. Put it on 3. See if that helps. Out. Supposed to put it on tighten first. Make sure that's screwed all the way down, because having it on just a few threads likely would pull the threads right off. Okay, this time we're on tighten. I can feel it pulling it in some. I'm going to go to 4 on the impact wrench, as high as it goes. So, my comparison of the bearing position on that other one was deceiving. Okay, that feels like it's all the way in. And we'll see the difference when I take this apart and put that back on. That's interesting. That doesn't want to turn now. Have a deep socket that's that big. Not deep enough anyway. Now you can see how close the flange is to the parking brake, which is why I said earlier when I was putting the parking brakes on, it would be extremely difficult to put those parking brakes on with that flange on there. I'm going to get a couple lug nuts and put them on those studs to protect those threads, because I'm going to have to beat on that tool to get it off. So last night I did look at a manual that I had up at the house, and they didn't give very good instructions on how to put this together. And when I came down here this morning, I looked at the Haynes manual I have here, and interestingly enough, they told you to put the seal in that goes on the outside, which is down by the flange where the brake drum and the wheel bolt to. Told you to put that on last. Now that's impossible, because once you've got that all together, there is no way to put that grease seal in. So that's kind of weird. Now, the big challenge that we have left is torquing this guy to 100 foot-pounds. That is tough to do. The last time I did this, I bolted all this to a wheel. I had it on the ground and I was sitting on the wheel and trying to turn it. That was hard to do. This time, I think I'm going to try, I say think because I'm not sure how effective it's going to be. I think I'm going to try to put that on a wheel, put that wheel on this cart and lean it up against that bench and use my body weight to push against the wheel while I crank the torque wrench. Because I don't see how I can do it with any kind of small stuff. One of the ways you can do it is to put it on the car, put the weight of the car on it, and then torque it. That probably is a pretty good way to do it, but I want to get this torqued and get the drive shafts, half shafts on and things like that, and all I've got is a frame, and that's not enough weight to, you know, it's sitting on jack stands on the ramps on the lift. That's not enough weight to withstand 100 foot-pounds of torque, I don't think. So I am going to try to get a wheel up here, get that through, get those lug nuts through the wheel, which means I got to put the brake drum on. And we'll see how that works, but it's likely going to be a job. So I tried for a bit to stick my pry bar in between the lug nuts and torque that, and that just didn't work. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to put the brake rotor on, I'm going to put a wheel on it, flip it over, and then try to brace that wheel up against that workbench. I'm not going to record me struggling with getting the wheel on there because it'll probably just generate some nasty comments. Actually, lifting the wheel up there was much easier than I thought it would be. Now I got to get the lugs lined up, and this is why these wheels are not going back on, because they are a bear to line up. I think these wheels are supposed to be hub-centric. Putting the spacers on eliminates the hub from engaging with the wheel. So then it becomes a lug-centric, and I don't know if you can see it there, but these lug nut holes are actually oblong, which makes it very difficult to get those lined up when you've got it on a wheel, I mean on the car. This is pretty easy by comparison because the wheel is just sitting on the hub. When you have the weight of the wheel going that way, it's almost impossible to get the dang things lined up. Yeah, this wouldn't be going this easy if I were doing it on a car. It has taken me sometimes 45 minutes to get one wheel lined up. And I guess that probably was before I decided to just take some RTV and basically glue the spacers to the back of the wheel. Now that they're glued to the back of the wheel, it makes it a lot easier, because you get the lug through the wheel, and you'd start threading it on and it would run into the spacer, so you have to get the spacer lined up. And then there were two spacers, which made it doubly difficult to get them both lined up. So I wouldn't recommend going with that type of an arrangement for disc brakes at all. Just not worth the hassle. Get yourself some wheels that are made to fit over the calipers. I don't know what to do to get rid of these wheels. So I've got them all started. I'll just take my speed wrench. They don't have to be torqued on for this. I just need it to hold it in place while I try to torque that nut in the back. Actually, since the impact wrench is already set up, I have it on low, because as I said, I don't need them torqued on. Just need them to hold the hub. Now I have to try to flip this over with extra weight of the control arm on it. Okay, so now I've got it on there, up against the bench. Maybe that's interesting. I can't move it. That should turn. Well, no, I see what it is. Caliper mount bolts ran into the brake drum. Okay, I loosened those caliper mount bolts, and now it turns like it's supposed to. But the wheel, if I can put enough pressure on it with my body, should keep that hub from turning. There's 100 foot-pounds. Awesome. Oh, neat. It's lined up perfectly with the hole to put the cotter pin in. Sometimes lucky is good. So these wheels are 15-inch wheels. The wheels I already have that I'm going to put on here, I have racing tires on them now, are 18-inch wheels, so they should come out to about here for the wheel. and I've got plenty of room. These are supposed to be able to be used with 5.5-inch back spacing on your wheels. So it does leave me the option of buying yet new wheels, which I have too many of already, and going with a really wide tire. So I've been promising all along to tell you how, if you just want to take a rear spindle apart to paint it and put it back together without pressing this bearing off. And that's the key, because you have to be able to get this seal seated in the housing. So what I do, take my trusty miter saw and a pipe, plastic pipe of a big enough diameter to fit around there, and I'm going to just kind of roughly see where I need to be. Now that obviously won't fit around this. So my next step is going to be take a hacksaw or something and basically just cut this into two pieces and slip them in on each side of that grease seal. I'm going to shut the camera off while I cut it in half. So I had a pretty good guess on the thickness I needed for that, because it needs to fit relatively tight so that it doesn't fall out while you're playing with it, but you can knock it out when you get the grease seal into position. So two halves. I'm going to start at the high point, and then I'll just use a little brass strip to knock it under that grease seal. And the idea is that as this gets pulled into the bearing cup, these shims will force the seal into its position. And they will get it most of the way in, and then you can take sort of a pry bar and, or a screwdriver, I think is what I used the last time, and just knock the, I'm sorry, first of all you knock these shims out of the way, and then you use your pry bar to seat the seal all the way. So it worked for me the last time, and this is going to be hard because it needs help. So, need to take that and put it in the vise to, I'll put the edge of the flange in the vise. I've already put one side in, but there's the other side ready to be tapped into place. And all I'm going to do is take a drift and a hammer and tap it in. And that's what I did on the other side. Actually, didn't even as this bearing gets drawn into the, kind of line up the seal a little bit better. As the bearing gets drawn into the hub, the seal will just follow it. And then once that gets started, I will knock these out with a screwdriver or something, and pry with maybe something like this between here and the seal to make sure it's firmly in the hub. Oh crap, I don't know where it cut at, where it didn't have it on. Basically, I will go over and report what I did. I started to install this, and then I said I was going to check on the status of the seal being drawn into the to the bearing housing. And these shims were in place where I put them. And let me zoom in on that. There is, and I'll point it out with a screwdriver, but I'll show you where the lip of the seal is already into the housing. Right there is the lip of the seal. So that, I think, is pretty much all the way in. I don't think it's going to go any further, but just for grins, we'll try and see if it can go in any further. And the answer to that is no. It's not going any further. So that seal is in. So now I'm just going to finish pulling the bearing into its housing. With my impact wrench. I still have it set on low, and I'm not going to up it until I need to. Okay, I think that's seated all the way just on low. Yep, I would say that's seated. So what I'll do now, turn this over to show you how close it is. What I'll do now is take that installation tool off. And everything is in there this time. The inside seal and that shield that goes over the seal is already in there. So once I get the installation tool off, all that's left to do is to put the nut on and torque it again. And again, it seems as though that's pretty tight on the shaft there. Hoping it isn't as tight as last time because I didn't use as much force. So here we go again with putting the lug nuts on so that I can put a bar in there. Let's see if you can see what I'm doing here. I'll put all 5 lug nuts on so that I can put my pry bar between them, and then maybe I'll actually video how I did it this time. Last time I don't think I videoed it, but this one went in nice and easy. All jobs should go that easy. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Get all these on. Probably 3 would be enough, but I'm going to put them all on. Because if I would damage something by taking a shortcut, I would pretty much be mad at myself. Some of the things I've damaged in taking it apart, there's nothing you can do. It just isn't going to happen. You know, it's rusted on, and you got to do what you got to do to get it apart. So what I did after I did that is I took my pry bar, which I set over here instead of putting away, wedged it between a couple of these, so that it wouldn't turn. Sure I'm holding it the right direction. I believe that's the way it has to go. And I put this wrench on here, and I had to hit it with a hammer the last time. This one wasn't as tight because I didn't have to go as far into the settings on the impact wrench to draw the bearings in, because this one was already set up and used. But that was how I did it. And then, after I did that, washer goes on, nut goes on. I'm going to find out where my hole is for the cotter pin, so it'll be easier to see. You know what? Make this a little bit easier on myself and position it so that these bolts aren't in the way. Oh, come on, it's supposed to go on easy. There you go. So now I've got the cotter pin in between the bolts. I'm going to have to try to get that pin bent a little bit so that the two sides are together. It's not wanting to go in. Looks like a new cotter pin, and I don't understand why it's like that. There. Now I can see it. Okay, my washer is still in there. So I'm going to lightly put this on with the impact wrench, just to, again, leaving it so that it's only on the first setting of the impact wrench. I don't want to over torque it. I want to leave something for the torque wrench to do. Oops. Nope. Got to go tighten this time. Okay. That's good enough. So, back to what I did before, which is flip this over, put a tire on it, so that I can put pressure on the tire to keep the spindle from turning while I torque it. Okay, if you watched earlier episodes where I took this apart, I marked the hub, the shim, and the rotor. Now, I'm not sure I'm actually going to use these rotors. I may actually upgrade the brakes, which maybe I'll upgrade them to Willwood or something, and maybe it'll have new rotors with the system. But for now, I'm putting these on. If you noticed, I didn't adjust the brakes yet, because that is 100% because of the fact that I'm undecided on whether I'm actually going to use these rotors or not, so there's no point in adjusting it for these rotors and then replacing them with something, then it'll be different. So here we go again with the tire. And as the day goes on, it gets heavier. And get as good a grip on it as I did last time. And my cart's rolling. Better re-grip it. There. First time was easier. Another one. So all that's going to happen for the next couple minutes is I'm going to struggle with getting these lug nuts through this wheel and the spacers. So I think I'm going to just turn off the video to make for a shorter video. Whoops. And before I tighten these down, I need to loosen those caliper mounting bolts, which I thought about it and then forgot about it. But they won't allow the tire to come on all the way. Okay, I don't remember if I videoed me torquing it last time. I think I did, but here's an important point to remember. The hole for the cotter pin is right here. It's important to note that before you start so that you know once you get your desired torque how far you have to go in order to get to your hole for your cotter pin. Grab it a little further out so I get more leverage. I need to lean into it. That was easier last time. Like I said, getting later in the day. It's getting harder. Okay, there's 100 pounds. And I can just barely see the hole. I've got to go about another 1/10 of a turn or something like that. Just a little bit more. A little bit more. The cart's turning. No wonder it looks like I'm making progress and I'm not. There you have it. Find my cotter pin. Trouble getting it through the hole because of that little offset in the pin. One end of it's coming through. Oh, only one end. So I had a brand new cotter pin that was straight. Looks like it should go through now. Maybe I should just bring another cotter pin down tomorrow. There. It's all the way through. It wouldn't go anywhere, but I might need to get another one and put a good one in there. So one tiny little additional thing here. That cotter pin was a bear. I tried several that, you know, they were slightly misaligned even though they looked new. And finally what I decided was to try putting a awl through it. And what I found is that the slots in the castle nut and the hole in the shaft for the wheel spindle not quite lined up. So after robbing another brand new cotter pin off of the shock mount that I didn't need because of these trailing arms not using it, I actually got a cotter pin through. I had to pound it through. If I turned the bolt any further, I would have been misaligned on this side. So sometimes it's just a bad situation that you can't do much about. Hammer that over, and since I have brass drift here, I'll hammer the other one down with it. At any rate, we're good now. Too much you'd think I missed that. So this trailing arm's ready to go. It's about time for me to quit for the day. I'll be taking that wheel off, setting the trailing arm up on the ramp right below where it's going to be installed, and pretty much call it a day. But what I accomplished today is getting 2 new trailing arm spindles installed.